The alien fleet descended towards Earth with confidence, their shimmering silver ships slicing through the atmosphere like silent predators. Commander Zurak stood tall on the bridge of the mothership, his glowing yellow eyes filled with arrogance. "Humans are weak," he muttered, watching the planet below. "Their threats mean nothing." As the first wave of dropships entered Earth's skies, something strange happened. The ship's control panels flickered, and red warning lights flashed across the screens. Captain Virox, leading the invasion force, growled in frustration. "Commander, we have a problem. Our navigation systems are malfunctioning." "Impossible," Zurak snapped. "Our technology is superior. Earth's defenses cannot." His words were cut short as the first dropship spiraled out of control. It tumbled through the sky, flames licking its hull before crashing into a mountain range below. Then another ship fell, and another. Panic spread through the alien ranks as ships lost power midair, crashing like broken toys. "Mayday! Mayday!" A soldier's desperate voice crackled through the comms. "We are losing." Static consumed the transmission. Zurak clenched his fists. "What is happening?" he barked. One of his engineers, a small but brilliant alien named Velik, checked the systems frantically. "Sir, something is disrupting our technology. It's like an invisible force is shutting us down." Earth's surface remained eerily silent. No explosions, no counterattacks, just their fleet crumbling on its own. Zurak gritted his teeth. "Impossible. Find the source of the disruption." Meanwhile, on the ground, the surviving alien troops who had managed to land found themselves in an even worse situation. Their weapons wouldn't activate. The plasma rifles, the energy shields, even their communications, all useless. General Turok, a battle-hardened warrior, pounded his fists against his useless rifle. "The humans. They knew we were coming," he growled. The sky above them flashed with a sudden, blinding pulse. A deep, rumbling hum spread across the battlefield. Every alien soldier froze as their armor vibrated, their helmets filled with static. And then, the real horror began. The ground beneath them shifted. At first, it seemed like an earthquake. But then, the land itself reacted. Roads cracked open, steel barriers rose from underground, massive energy grids activated. The humans had prepared a battlefield designed to trap them. One of the soldiers screamed as his own armor locked up, the servos freezing him in place. He toppled over, unable to move. Others tried to flee, but their suits betrayed them. The advanced exoskeletons, once their greatest strength, had become their cages. From the shadows, human soldiers emerged, calm, prepared, and heavily armed. They carried old-fashioned projectile weapons, the kind that didn't rely on energy-based technology. They had been waiting. A human commander stepped forward, his voice cold and sharp. "We warned you." Before the aliens could react, the humans opened fire, the air filled with the sharp cracks of gunfire, bullets tearing through powerless alien defenses. Explosions ripped through the invasion force as carefully planted traps detonated. Panic spread among the alien troops, their once unshakable confidence crumbling. On the mothership, Zurak watched in horror. This is a massacre," he whispered. Velik turned to him, fear in his eyes. "Sir, the humans, they outsmarted us. This is not just a defense. This was a trap." Zurak's claws tightened around the edge of his command console. "Then we will not give them the satisfaction of victory," he growled. "Prepare the mothership's main cannon. We will wipe them out in one strike." But just as the weapon systems powered up, another shockwave hit the ship. The lights flickered, screams turned to static, and the entire mothership trembled. The humans had been waiting for this moment, and they had just made their next move. The alien fleet descended through Earth's atmosphere like a storm of silver and fire, their confidence unshaken despite the warnings from the humans below. Commander Zurak stood on the bridge of his mothership, his arms crossed behind his back, eyes glowing with cold amusement as he watched the first wave of dropships pierce the clouds. His species had conquered countless worlds, their technology far beyond anything the primitive humans could comprehend. This was nothing more than another routine invasion. The warnings from Earth were empty threats, the desperate cries of a doomed species. Zirak allowed himself a smirk. They should have surrendered, he muttered. Down below, the first wave of alien ships tore through the sky, their hulls gleaming under the sun. But as they neared the ground, something went wrong. The control panels inside the cockpits flickered, warning signals blaring through the ships. Captain Virox, leading the invasion force, slammed his fist against the console. Navigation is failing. What is happening? His co-pilot frantically scanned the data, but the screens were nothing but flashing symbols and static. One of the pilots screamed through the comms, his voice crackling with panic. Losing control. Then silence. The ship spun wildly in the air, flames bursting from its engines as it crashed into the mountains below. Another ship followed, then another. One by one, the powerful invasion fleet turned into helpless, burning wreckage. On the mothership, Zirak's smirk vanished. His claws dug into the edge of the command console. "Report," he barked. The crew scrambled to analyze the situation, but the results made no sense. Velik, the chief engineer, hesitated before speaking. "Commander, it's an energy disruption. Something on Earth is interfering with our technology." Zirak's eyes narrowed. "That's impossible." But the evidence was undeniable. The dropships were falling like stones, their systems failing one after another. "Find the source of the disruption and shut it down," Zirak ordered, his voice laced with frustration. Meanwhile, on the surface, the chaos only worsened. The few alien soldiers who had managed to land were met with an even worse nightmare. Their weapons refused to function. Plasma rifles sparked and died in their hands. Energy shields flickered, then collapsed entirely. The communication devices in their helmets went silent, cutting them off from their commanders. General Tarak, a seasoned warrior with centuries of battle experience, struggled to activate his armor's combat mode, but it remained frozen. He turned to his troops, his voice a low growl. "Something is very wrong." Then the ground beneath them rumbled. At first, they thought it was an earthquake, but it was far more than that. The very battlefield had come alive. Roads cracked open, and from beneath, massive steel barriers rose, forming an inescapable maze. Energy grids flickered to life, emitting waves of interference that crippled alien technology further. The ground was not just reacting, it was a trap. The humans had prepared for this invasion far better than anyone had imagined. Panic spread through the alien troops. A soldier screamed as his exosuit locked up, freezing him in place. He fell forward, unable to move. Others tried to retreat, but their once powerful armor now felt like dead weight, trapping them. The air filled with shouts of confusion, frustration, and rising fear. And then, from the shadows, the humans emerged. They moved with precision, clad in lightweight battle gear, carrying weapons that did not rely on the advanced energy technology of the aliens. Their rifles fired solid projectiles, ancient, primitive, yet devastatingly effective. A human commander stepped forward, his gaze cold, his stance unwavering. His voice cut through the battlefield like a blade. "We warned you." And then the gunfire began. The sharp cracks of bullets filled the air, tearing through the defenseless alien ranks. Explosions erupted from carefully placed traps, catching those who tried to run. The invasion force, once so confident, now found themselves outmaneuvered, outmatched, and utterly helpless. On the mothership, Zirak watched in stunned silence. His forces, his warriors, were being slaughtered. The battlefield below was a nightmare of smoke, fire, and falling bodies. His mind raced. How had the humans done this? They were supposed to be weak, inferior, and yet they had anticipated everything. His fingers curled into fists. He would not allow this humiliation to continue. "Prepare the mothership's main cannon," he ordered, his voice a low snarl. "We will erase them in one strike." But before the weapon systems could fully activate, the ship trembled violently. The lights flickered. Screens turned to static. Another shockwave pulsed through the air. And suddenly, every system aboard the mothership faltered. The alarms blared as the crew scrambled to regain control, but nothing responded. Then, through the interference, a single message crackled through the command deck. A human voice. Calm. Cold. "We were waiting for you." Zurak stood frozen on the bridge of his mothership, his mind struggling to process the disaster unfolding before him. His invasion force had been crippled, his soldiers left powerless, their advanced weapons and armor reduced to nothing more than dead weight. The humans had not only been prepared, they had set a trap so perfect that it left no room for retaliation. Every plan, every strategy the alien fleet had relied upon had been dismantled in a matter of minutes. And now, to make matters worse, the mothership itself was under attack. The sudden shockwave that had just ripped through the command deck was no accident. It was the next phase of Earth's counterattack. The crew worked frantically, attempting to restore control, but the screens remained filled with static. The energy reserves of the ship, once limitless, were depleting at an alarming rate. Zurak's claws dug into the armrest of his chair as he turned to Velik. "Status report. What is happening?" he barked. The engineer's blue skin had paled, his fingers flying across the flickering console as he tried to make sense of the chaos. "Sir, something is draining our power. It's unlike anything we've encountered before." Zurak's eyes narrowed. "That's impossible. No species has technology that can disable our systems at this scale." But deep inside, a cold realization crept into his thoughts. The humans weren't just lucky. They weren't just well prepared. They had been expecting this. They had spent years, perhaps decades, designing this battlefield. They had let the invaders believe in their own superiority, only to crush them the moment they set foot on Earth. A sudden explosion rocked the mothership, sending crew members tumbling across the deck. The lights flickered again, and this time, they didn't come back on. A chilling silence settled over the command center, broken only by the distant sounds of emergency alarms. Then, the external sensors came back online for a brief moment, and what Zurak saw filled him with something he had never felt before. Fear. Outside the ship, hundreds of human warships had emerged from the darkness of space, surrounding the crippled alien fleet. Their designs were different, bulkier, built for durability rather than sleekness. But their weapons were primed, and unlike the aliens, their systems were fully operational. Zurak watched as one of his own cruisers tried to flee, its engines flaring up in a desperate escape attempt. But before it could get far, a concentrated volley of missiles and railgun fire tore through its hull, reducing it to nothing but a fiery wreck drifting in the void. The realization hit Zurak like a hammer. The humans had hidden their space fleet, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The entire invasion had been a setup. Earth had never been defenseless. It had never been weak. It had been hunting them from the very beginning. His breath came in sharp, shallow gasps as he turned to his officers. "Prepare for emergency retreat," he ordered, his voice strained. "We need to regroup." But his words were met with silence. No one moved. No one dared to speak. The bridge crew was paralyzed, their expressions a mix of disbelief and terror. Then, through the static-filled communication system, a voice came through. Human, calm, and utterly ruthless. "Running won't save you." Zurak's eyes widened. They had hacked into his own ship's systems. Before he could respond, the human voice continued. "You were given a choice. You ignored the warnings. Now you face the consequences." The ship trembled once more as human forces launched their final assault. Missiles streaked through space, railguns thundered, and the alien mothership's shields, once thought to be impenetrable, began to buckle under the relentless barrage. Zurak clenched his fists. He had led countless invasions. He had seen civilizations fall. But never had he been on the receiving end of such absolute destruction. The humans were not just fighting back. They were making a statement. Velik turned to him, desperation in his voice. "Sir, what do we do?" Zirak's jaw tightened. There was only one option left. Survival. "Initiate the warp drive," he ordered. "We need to escape." But even as he said it, he knew the truth. The humans had planned for everything, and they weren't going to let him leave alive. Zirak's fingers trembled as he gripped the edge of his command chair, his once unshakable confidence now a distant memory. The mothership groaned under the relentless assault, its massive hull shuddering with every impact. Human warships moved with deadly precision, their attacks focused and unrelenting. The shields, which had once been the pride of the fleet, flickered weakly before collapsing altogether. Warning lights flashed across every console, alarms blaring in a chaotic symphony of impending doom. Zirak turned to Velik, his voice sharp and desperate. "Activate the warp drive. We must retreat." The engineer's hands flew across the console, but his face twisted with fear. "Sir, it's not responding. They've disabled it." Zirak's chest tightened. He had never considered the possibility that his fleet, his unstoppable armada, would be rendered powerless. But the evidence was undeniable. The humans had done the impossible. They had predicted every move, countered every advantage, and now they had stripped the invaders of their last hope. Zirak's mind raced. He refused to accept defeat. He refused to believe that these primitive beings had outwitted him. There had to be another way. His eyes darted to the fleet's remaining ships, now reduced to nothing more than burning wreckage drifting in space. The invasion force, once numbering in the thousands, had been reduced to mere fragments. His crew looked to him, their expressions filled with silent pleading. The bridge was eerily quiet except for the occasional static from malfunctioning systems. Zirak took a deep breath. There was still one last move he could make. If retreat was impossible, then destruction was his only option. He turned to his weapons officer, a hardened veteran who had served at his side for decades. "Prepare the self-destruct sequence," he ordered. The officer hesitated. "Sir," Zirak's eyes burned with cold fury. "If we are to fall, we will take them with us." But before the command could be executed, the entire ship trembled violently, a force unlike anything before ripping through the mothership's structure. The lights flickered once more, but this time they did not return. A deep mechanical hum filled the air, a sound that sent a chill through every crew member's spine. Then, without warning, a new voice echoed through the command deck, a voice that did not belong to any of them. "Your war ends here." Zirak's blood ran cold. The humans were inside his ship. The realization hit him like a hammer. They had not only disabled his systems, they had infiltrated them. The humans weren't just fighting with brute force. They had taken control. The ship's security doors hissed open, and for the first time in his life, Zirak found himself face to face with his enemy. The human strike team moved with terrifying efficiency. Their weapons were old by galactic standards, solid projectiles, no energy-based designs, but they were lethal nonetheless. The first shots rang out, precise and deliberate, cutting down Zirak's guards before they could even react. The air filled with the scent of burning metal and blood. Zirak drew his blade, the ancient weapon of his people, a symbol of his authority. But deep inside, he knew it was useless. One of the humans, a commander by his stance, stepped forward. His eyes were cold, unshaken by the carnage around him. He studied Zirak with the same detached expression one might give a dying animal. Then he spoke. "Surrender." Zirak bared his teeth. "Never." The human nodded as if he had expected this answer. He raised his weapon, and Zirak braced himself. But instead of firing, the human simply said, "Then you will die knowing that your kind was never as powerful as you believed." A sharp pain exploded in Zirak's chest. He staggered back, his vision darkening. The sound of gunfire filled the air once more, but he barely heard it. His mind drifted to the warnings Earth had given, the arrogance with which he had ignored them. The humans had not just won a battle. They had rewritten the rules of war. As the world faded, Zurich realized the truth too late. They had never stood a chance. The silence on the mothership's bridge was deafening. Smoke curled through the air, mixing with the scent of burnt metal and the coppery tang of alien blood. The once proud flagship of the Zurich fleet now drifted helplessly in orbit, its weapons silenced, its crew slaughtered, and its commander lying motionless on the cold floor. The battle was over, but the humans were not done yet. The human strike team moved through the ship with ruthless efficiency, clearing every corridor, every chamber, making sure there were no survivors left to regroup. Their weapons, though primitive by galactic standards, had proven devastatingly effective against an enemy that had relied too much on technology. Where the Zurich had expected to dominate with superior firepower, they had been rendered powerless. And now, those who had once seen themselves as conquerors lay broken at the feet of their intended victims. Back on Earth, the battlefield was eerily quiet. The surviving alien soldiers had surrendered, dropping their dead weapons in defeat. Some of them still struggled to understand what had happened. How had a species they considered weak managed to dismantle an entire invasion force? How had the humans anticipated their every move? The answer was simple. The humans had never been as weak as the galaxy believed. They had been underestimated, ignored, treated as insignificant. And they had spent decades preparing for the day when someone would make the mistake of testing them. General Turok, one of the few remaining Zurich officers, sat on his knees in the dirt, staring at the human soldiers who now surrounded him. His once mighty armor was nothing more than a useless shell, his advanced weaponry reduced to scrap. He had fought in wars across countless worlds, but never had he seen an enemy fight like this. The humans were brutal, relentless, but above all, they were precise. Every shot, every attack had been planned. It was not just luck. It was strategy, a kind of warfare the Zurich had never encountered before. A human officer approached, his boots kicking up dust as he stopped in front of Turok. He held his rifle casually, as if he already knew that the battle had been decided long before it even started. Turok looked up, his throat dry. He had never felt fear in battle before, but this was something different. He had faced defeat before, but never like this. There was no mercy in the eyes of these humans, only cold, calculated victory. The officer studied him for a moment before speaking. "You thought we were weak." His voice was calm, almost emotionless. "You ignored our warnings." Turok swallowed hard. We didn't know," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. The human gave a small, humorless smile. "You should have listened." Above them, in the wreckage-filled sky, the remains of the Zurich fleet continued to burn. The once great armada, the force that had been meant to conquer Earth, was now nothing more than floating debris. The human fleet had suffered losses, but they had won. And they had sent a message that would spread across the stars. Humanity was not to be underestimated. On the ground, the remaining Zurich prisoners were rounded up, their fates uncertain. Some whispered among themselves, wondering if they would be executed, if the humans would show them the same mercy they had refused to give. Others simply sat in silence, too stunned to process what had happened. In the control centers of Earth, military leaders and strategists watched the victory unfold, their expressions grim but satisfied. The war had been won, but this was only the beginning. The Zurich had not been the first to see Earth as an easy target, and they would not be the last. One of the commanders turned to his team. "Send the footage across all channels. Let the galaxy see what happens when you invade Earth." The message was clear. Earth had warned them. And now, the entire universe would know what happened to those who refused to listen. The galaxy trembled. The fall of the Zurich invasion fleet had sent shockwaves across every star system, every empire, every species that had once looked upon Earth as a backwater planet, a primitive world unworthy of concern. The transmission of the battle, of the brutal and precise destruction of the so-called superior forces had spread like wildfire. The sight of Zirek's mighty warships reduced to nothing more than floating wreckage, of alien soldiers lying defeated in the dirt, of their once mighty commander lying lifeless on his own ship. These images had shattered the illusion of human weakness. For centuries, the dominant civilizations of the galaxy had viewed humanity as insignificant, a race confined to a single planet, one that had only recently begun to explore beyond its own star. They had watched, amused, as humans struggled with their primitive technology, waged wars among themselves, and clung to their fragile existence. But now, the laughter had stopped. The galaxy had seen what Earth was truly capable of. The trap they had laid, the technology they had developed in secret, the brutal efficiency with which they had dismantled a force that had never known defeat, it was a warning to all. On a distant world, far from Earth, a gathering of alien leaders watched the footage in silence. Some shifted uncomfortably in their seats, others whispered among themselves in hushed, worried tones. The Zirak had been one of the most feared militaries in the known universe. If they could fall so easily, what did that mean for the rest of them? The High Chancellor of the Threx Dominion, a reptilian species that had once debated launching their own invasion of Earth, slowly turned to his advisors. His voice, usually filled with arrogance, was quiet, uncertain. "How long," he asked, "have we underestimated them?" No one had an answer. Back on Earth, humanity did not celebrate. There were no grand parades, no cheers of victory. The cost of war was never something to be taken lightly, and though they had won, they knew this was just the beginning. The soldiers who had fought and bled to defend their world stood solemnly among the ruins, watching as the last of the alien prisoners were taken away. The air still smelled of smoke and blood, a reminder of what had been lost. In a hidden military bunker deep beneath the surface, Earth's leaders gathered around a massive screen. The footage of the battle played on a loop, analyzed and dissected. They had won, but victory was never permanent. Somewhere out there, another empire, another species, was watching, studying, planning. Earth's survival had depended on being underestimated. But now, the secret was out. A general, his face lined with exhaustion, turned to the others. "They know what we're capable of now. Next time, they won't be so careless." A scientist, still in her lab coat, nodded, "Which means next time, they'll come prepared." The room fell silent. The Zirak had thought themselves invincible. They had relied too much on their advanced technology, had assumed their superiority would be enough. But humanity had fought wars not with superior firepower, but with strategy, adaptability, and an unwillingness to surrender. Earth had used its disadvantage as a weapon, turning its so-called weakness into an impenetrable shield. But now, that advantage was gone. The leaders of Earth knew what came next. The galaxy had been warned, but warnings were often ignored. There would be others, other fleets, other armies, other empires who would see Earth as a threat to be eliminated rather than a world to be feared. The victory against the Zirak was not the end. It was merely the first battle in a war that had only just begun. A message was prepared, one that would be sent across the stars. A simple statement, one that would serve as both a warning and a promise. We are humanity. We do not seek war, but we will not bow. We were underestimated once. Do not make that mistake again. And as the words echoed across the vast reaches of space, every empire, every ruler, every warlord who had ever considered Earth an easy target now faced a terrifying truth. Humanity was no longer the hunted. They were the hunters.